But
And
yeah,
one's a Myers and one's a Briggs.
they're a mother-daughter team. Catherine is, I think, the mother, Isabel is the daughter, and they were very influenced by this portion of scripture. Welcome to Unhinged, separating faith from fiction. I'm your host, Michelle Cuss, and I'm joined by my co-host, the very normal Dr. Martin Trench. If you don't understand that reference, go read his social media posts. And today I'm going to be doing a short teaching on the Myers-Briggs for you. And I originally did this teaching inside Martin's school community for his Discover Your Life Purpose challenge. It was part of a series of videos, actually, that I did. The first one, I talked all about what makes you come alive, and we talked about the true self versus the false self. So if you want to check that out, click on that link right there. And then the second video in the series, we talked all about the acronym SHAPE, your spiritual gifts, your heart passions, your abilities, your personality type, your life experiences. And if you want to check that video, just click right there if you're watching on YouTube. So this is the third in the series on Myers-Briggs. So this is zooming in on the P of that SHAPE acronym, which is personality type. And I will tell you, if you're listening to the audio, I'm going to leave a link down in the show notes for you to check this out on YouTube, because I do have a pretty extensive slide deck that goes along with this teaching, and I wouldn't want you to miss that. So when you're done listening to the audio, then click on that link, go find it in the show notes, click on that link and watch it on YouTube, because I think you'll get a lot more out of it if you can actually see the slides that I'm referring to. And with that, let's get unhinged. All right, so let's talk about the Myers-Briggs here. The Myers-Briggs is a personality framework similar to the Enneagram or the StrengthsFinder or DISC, or the Big Five is another one. There's lots of them out there. What sets the Myers-Briggs apart, it's been around for a very long time, probably 80 plus years. It's been around since World War II, and it's based on the work of Carl Jung, who his stuff has been around for eons. So basically, this is helping people discover how they're wired, why that matters. And it's based on the work of Carl Jung. Carl Jung actually came up with the first three: extraversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling. And it was actually Myers and Briggs who came up with the JP scale. We'll get all into all of that if you're not familiar with it. So they basically took the work of Carl Jung and expanded upon it. So this is Catherine Cook Briggs, who was an INFJ, by the way. Woohoo! And Isabel Briggs Myers, her daughter, who was an INFP. And the Myers-Briggs helps explain how people think, decide, and interact with the world. This is from my book, actually.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, people should buy that just for the foreword, I
Just
think,
for
you
the
know?
foreword, which was written by you. Fueled by their faith, determination, and quest for world peace. That was their
Yeah,
quest. They
yeah.
compiled their extensive research into a manuscript. In 1980, Isabel Briggs Myers, along with her son Peter Myers, published the book Gifts Differing. The title of the book came from a portion of Romans 12, verse 6, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us. So gifts differing is considered the definitive text on the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So yeah, straight from this verse right here, Romans
Wow,
12.
that is excellent. That is excellent.
Mhm.
And it's actually amazing how many things that are common and popular in the secular world
Mhm.
have Christian origins in some
Oh
sense.
yeah. And
It's
people will say, "Oh, the Myers-Briggs is just, that's just pop psychology, that's astrology, whatever." And it's like, well, this actually came straight out of Romans 12. This is, you can think of it like a rough pencil sketch. It's not going to tell you everything about you. Obviously, there's lots of nuance, lots of color, your life experiences, your spiritual gifts, your traumas, all those things play in, right? So this will give you a rough pencil sketch, but keep in mind that one INFJ is different from another. One INTJ is different from another, but they do share some significant things in common. So if you have the same four letters or even three similar letters, you're going to share a lot in common with that person. So just keep that in mind. So, why personality matters? Why study this? It's interesting. And I got trained and certified in the Myers Briggs in 1999. So, it's been 27 years. It's been a minute. And it's still interesting to me. I think it's probably the same category as Martin would put victorious eschatology. Like, it feels like an old like, me and the MBTI feel like an old married couple at this point, because I've been talking about it for so long and writing about it and coaching people on it. But it's still interesting, and there are all still people out there who have never heard of this, have never taken it, so I still teach on it. So, personality frameworks help us understand how people process information, how people can communicate more effectively, appreciate the differences in others, and align with our natural strengths. So, it's not just about you, it's also understanding the people around you and what makes them tick and maybe why they're ticking you off. So instead of asking what's wrong with me, we start asking how was I wired? So this MBTI will give you a good sense of how you're wired. So here's how it works if you're not familiar with it, which most people are, I think, by this point. But if you're not familiar, the MBTI measures preferences. It's not a test, so you can't like ace it. You can't, there's no right or wrong answers. So we don't call it a test. It's just an assessment of your preferences. And it has four preference pairs. And these are called dichotomies. And each person prefers one side of each preference pair. So you're going to fall on one side or the other in terms of your preferences. Now, it might be a very slight preference for something, or it might be a huge preference. But you do have a preference for one or the other, including extroversion and introversion. And these combine into 16 personality types. I will tell you that the four letters of your Myers-Briggs type is just a code. The real meat of the Myers-Briggs comes when we talk about cognitive functions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So, for example, you have INFJ, ESTP, ENFP, ISTJ. These are examples of personality Myers-Briggs codes. And each type reflects a pattern of preferences. So these aren't your abilities. That's how it's different from the A in shape. That's your abilities, what you're good at. These are your preferences and how you interact with the world. I am still fighting my cold, so bear with me. First dichotomy is where you get your energy, and this has to do with extroversion and introversion. Extroversion, you are energized by the external world, the outer world of people, things, places. So you get energy from interaction. You often think and process out loud, process externally, right? So you're thinking your thoughts out here, probably with somebody else. Extroverts, by the way, they spelled this wrong. The traditional spelling is extra with an A, but they changed it to O so it matches introvert. I don't know. It seems kind of dumb to me. They're energized by spending time with others. They prefer larger groups of friends. They think out loud and they're outgoing and expressive in general. Not always, but most of the time. And then you have introversion. This is energy. They get energy from solitude, from being alone. They're energized by the internal world of thoughts, ideas, reflections, patterns, spotting, that kind of thing. So they think internally and they reflect before speaking. So whereas an extrovert might do their thinking out here in the external world, even if they're alone, they may need to talk something out in the external world. An introvert is going to sort of fully bake their idea in their head and then give it to you. So introverts really dislike being interrupted because they're not processing, usually not processing their thought out here with you in the external world. They've already processed it. They've already fully baked their thought. And so what you're getting is a fully baked thought, and they really want to express that and they don't want to be interrupted. So, and by the way, introverts tend to do one thing at a time. They're not as good at multitasking as extroverts are, and they tend to get in this focus mode. And so, if you come in the room when they're in focus mode, that can be really disorienting and disruptive to an introvert who might take some time to get into that flow state. So, they don't do that cognitive switching as quickly as an extrovert will. And extroverts actually use a different pathway in their brain for processing. It's a dopamine pathway. It's a shorter, physically shorter pathway in the brain. So it happens really quick. Versus an introvert will prefer using a pathway called the acetylcholine pathway in their brain for processing. Physically, it's a longer pathway, and that's why introverts will take longer sometimes to process their thoughts. They're actually Their thoughts are going physically through a longer pathway called the acetylcholine pathway. So, the key question here is, do you recharge by engaging in the outside world or by withdrawing? So, sometimes we call extroverts energy expenders, and they have what's called a lower basal state of arousal, which means it sounds sexual. It's not. It just means that their brain is like more down here. It's less aroused, so to speak. And so you have to do things to get that basal state of arousal up. You have to talk to people, go see things, go places, interact. And introverts, in contrast, have a higher basal state of arousal. So, just their normal everyday living, their brain is switched on a little bit more or a lot more than an extrovert's brain. This is why it takes introverts longer to wind down for bed at night in general than it takes an extrovert because their basal state of arousal is higher. So, if you go into, let's say, a rave, an extrovert is gonna be like, "Yeah, my basal state of arousal's here, and I'm in this lights and music and all this, like, stimulation, and yeah, it's going up here, and that feels good." And an introvert's already up here, and so it might be overstimulating to an introvert to be in that same environment. So, introverts are prone to overstimulation. That whole conversation sounded sexual. I promise you it's not. Um, so, introversion is not shyness. Introversion is you can get mentally and emotionally exhausted in long social interactions, but shyness, you're uneasy and anxious in social interactions. It's a form of social anxiety. This is a personality trait, not social anxiety. Alone time is your recharge time. And for shyness, alone time is not necessarily enjoyable, but social time does induce fear. So let's not equate introversion with shyness. Those are two separate things, okay? Dichotomy number 2, how you take in information. There are two preferences here, one for sensing. So, sensing, we focus on the facts. We are practical, we are detail oriented and present focused or past focused. Intuition focuses on patterns. It's like, I don't know how I know it, but in my gut, I know it. It is really hard to describe intuition, especially if you're not an intuitive. It just is. You just know. And it's because you have this kind of subconscious collection of thoughts and ideas and reflections that you are putting together in this like flash of insight. I don't know how to explain intuition. I've been doing this almost 30 years. Yeah.
I sometimes think of that intuition as being a bit like AI. You know how, like, if you're in Chat GPT, you ask it a question, and in a split second, it has scanned the entire internet worldwide. And so I think that's what I feel like, that your intuition has, in half a second, scanned all the knowledge you have, all the experiences you have, everything else, and said, "Yeah, this is it."
Mhm.
But you're totally unaware of the whole process.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily go through steps to get to that
No.
conclusion. You
Oh,
just
I
go from
know.
point
Yeah.
A to Z. Yeah. Big picture thinking, conceptual, future focused, different from sensors. Sensors like facts, intuitives like ideas. Down to earth versus dreams. Practical versus theoretical. Make versus create. All right. Even the words that you prefer are different. And there is a word section in the actual Myers-Briggs assessment, the one you pay for, the real one, where you just choose which word you like better, this or this, this or this, this or this. And it's really interesting what it reveals about you. Five senses versus imagination, trusted concrete experience versus vision, and past and present versus future. So the question here is, do you prefer facts or possibilities? Moving right along to dichotomy 3, this is how you make decisions. We have thinkers and feelers on this one. Thinking, and by the way, thinkers can feel, feelers can think. Good? Yeah. So thinkers prefer logical analysis. They're going to step out of the situation and evaluate it from an objective point of view. Logical analysis, objective decision making, they prioritize fairness and consistency. Feelers step into the situation and evaluate it subjectively according to their values. So they have an emphasis on values and relationships, harmony, consider the impact on people, so extenuating circumstances. They might not make the best judges because of that, like if you're sitting on the bench and yeah, that kind of thing. And they will prioritize harmony and authenticity, actually. So the words we have thinkers and feelers, logic versus values, objective versus personal, frankness versus tactfulness. This is reminding me of some of Martin's social media posts. Truth versus love, justice versus mercy, critique versus praise, and task oriented versus people oriented. Critique is an interesting one because thinkers think of the word critique in a positive way, like, give me a critique of this. I need your critique. Or even the word critical, they don't have a negative connotation of that word versus a lot of feelers do. They think the word critique or critical is a negative thing. The key question here is forgot to make that bold. Do you decide primarily with logic or values? And again, thinkers, it's not like they're cut off from their emotions or anything like that. They just evaluate. This is a decision making preference, and they evaluate from an objective point of view versus feelers. Feelers can still think, right? We can still use our critical thinking skills, but this is how we make decisions out of our values, harmony, authenticity, that kind of thing. And we have the fourth dichotomy. This is how you approach life. So, how you kind of orient yourself in the world. Judging. Judgers this has nothing to do with being judgmental, okay? This is just a psychological term. So judgers like things structured, they like to plan ahead, they prefer closure and organization, and perceivers. So they're going to approach a task they're going to see the deadline and they're going to approach the task maybe step by step because the approaching deadline for a judger creates stress, negative stress. Okay, so they're more likely to plan out their steps step by step so they get there in a timely fashion so they're not rushed at the deadline. Perceivers, on the other hand, are more flexible, more adaptable. They prefer openness and spontaneity. So you have closure versus openness, decision versus options, scheduled versus spontaneous, organized versus disorganized. Sorry. Plan versus experience, control versus flexible, and now versus later. There might be words in there that you don't like. Too bad. I mean, judgers do like to control their outside environment. This is how you interact with the outside world. So if your outside environment out here is very chaotic, that's going to disturb a J. Probably not as much a perceiver. You can kind of tell by the state of your desk, your car, your office, if you're working with a J or a P. It just is. P does not mean procrastinator. A lot of people think that means procrastinator. It does not mean procrastinator. It also doesn't mean perceptive. It's perceiver is just somebody who is more emergent in their approach to life. And the way that they approach tasks is differently. So if you have the deadline out here, a perceiver is going to spend a lot more time information gathering at the beginning of the process, and they're going to get a creative burst right before the deadline. So the looming deadline creates positive stress, and they get some of their best work done right before the deadline in that creative burst, which would make a J probably a lot more stressed out than a perceiver. Again, I keep forgetting to bold. Do you prefer structure and closure? Do you like to have things on your calendar, scheduled, planned? When you have a checklist, do you like going to check things off your list? Does that give you a lot of, internal satisfaction to check things off your list? You might be a J. But if you like more flexibility, if you're more energized by starting projects, you might be a perceiver. If you get more energized by finishing a project and checking it off your list, you might be a judger. And one is not better than the other, but I will tell you, J's are better. No, I'm just joking. But I will tell you This is the scale. This particular dichotomy is the one that causes the most stress in relationships, is the JP. So here we have the 4 dichotomies. You've got how you're energized, extroversion, introversion, how you take in information through your 5 senses, through sensing, or more through intuition, your gut hunch, how you make decisions by logical, analytical analysis using your brain, or through values, harmony, authenticity, using your heart. Again, you have access to both. One isn't better than the other. And then how you like to orient yourself and your lifestyle in the outer world. So do you prefer judging where things are more organized or perceiving where things are more open and emergent and spontaneous? I'll tell you, extroversion is about at last count anyway, it's about 49% E, 51% I in the general population. Sensing is about 73%, so there's definitely a lot more sensors than Ns, and about 27% intuitives in the general population. Thinkers and feelers are about 50-50, but there's a gender difference. So about 60-40 favoring males for thinking. So if you're a female and you're a thinker, you might feel a little out of sync with other females sometimes because of that. And then feelers, again, these are 50-50 in the general population, but feelers, it's about 65% female, 35% male. So if you're a male feeler, at times you may feel a little out of sync with other males because of that preference. But interestingly, the feeling preference expresses differently in males versus females a lot of times. Same with thinking. So there's some interesting studies with that. And then JP, there's slightly more judgers in the population than perceivers. I think it's something like 55% versus 45, something like that. So pretty slight, but there's slightly more Js in the general population than Ps. All right, so when you figure out your preferences, the Myers-Briggs or some cheap knockoff of the Myers-Briggs will take you through questions that basically you should be able to answer those boom, 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 like super quickly and get each of your letters here. Then you end up with this type table that has preferences that combine into these 16 personality types. At the top, we have all the N's. So these first two, a typical type table will look like this. So these first 2 lines here are all of our N's. So that's why it says possible. And then on the upper left side, we have the NFs. So it says valuing. Sorry, it's still a little blurry here. So we have the INFJ, ENFJ, ENFP, INFP. And then the upper right, we have the NTs, the visioning. So we have the INTJ, ENTJ, ENTP, INTP. So these are all the N's on top. And then below are the S's. So these are the present. So possible versus present. Over on the left-hand side, we have the feelers, NFs and SFs. So we have the feelers in the lower left, the SFs, ESFP, ISFP, ISFJ, ESFJ. And then the lower right, we have the thinkers. So this whole right-hand side is thinkers, N's on top, S's on the bottom. And the lower right, we have the STs, ISTP, ESTP, ESTJ, ISTJ. Make sense? And these are the cute little nicknames that they give you when you figure out your type. So I'm the INFJ counselor. I will tell you, I did go to college to be a counselor. And I quickly dropped out of that profession because I didn't like listening to people's problems all day. God bless the counselors of the world. But these just give you kind of like a little snap. My favorite one actually is field marshal. I just think that's so funny. Whenever I meet an ENTJ, I just want to salute. Anyway, that is what it is. And then just some important clarifications. The MBTI obviously does not measure your intelligence. It does not measure your spiritual maturity, your character, your ability. It is generally given to people 14 and up. Like, it's pretty accurate, 14, 15 and up. The most common question that I get is, can I change? Like, do I change on one of the scales, on one of the dichotomies? I will also mention this. The Myers-Briggs is typically given to people who are on the sort of more neurotypical end of things. If you're a little bit more neurospicy on the spectrum, autistic, that kind of thing, or if you have a personality disorder. it may not be as accurate. It might be accurate, but you would wanna take the step 3 with a professional counselor and really get the nitty-gritty of what your actual Myers-Briggs type is. You do have a personality. If you don't have one, just write to Myers-Briggs Foundation and they'll send you one. Just kidding. You do have a personality. Even if you're neurospicy, you're still somewhere on the Myers-Briggs, spectrum, but it might take a little more than just a typical assessment to get at it because you're processing information differently in your neurospicy brain. So, can you give it to children? Yes, it's a different form. I'm actually certified on that one too. It's called the MMTIC. It's given to children differently with pictures and things like that. But yes, you can measure Myers-Briggs. I wouldn't put a ton of stock in their results until they become more like 14, 15, 16, high school, college, that and their personality is a little bit more formed. I will say I was convinced that my daughters were extroverts when they were younger. All 3 of them are introverts. I was convinced that my middle daughter, I was highly convinced she was an ISFJ or an ESFJ, and she's now an N, big time N. So kids can sometimes throw you for a loop, right? They're still forming their brains. They're still seeing the world in a concrete way. So it makes them look like a sensor, but they might not be. So it can be a little trickier with children, so you just whatever their four-letter type comes out to be, you have to kinda hold that with an open hand. This simply describes your preferences. You can think of it like left-handed versus right-handed, like, when you sign your name with your dominant hand, it feels natural and easy, right? It looks good. You've been doing it forever, right? And if you sign your name with your non-dominant hand, it feels awkward and childish, it looks dumb, it takes you longer, but you can do it, right? You can still do it. And the Myers-Briggs is like that. So you can still use all of these cognitive functions, and you do. You do use them. But one is gonna feel more natural, more easy, it's gonna flow better, and the other one is gonna feel not as natural, it's gonna be a little more awkward. It might feel like writing with your non-dominant hand. You can still do it. If you're a hardcore thinker, you can still present as a feeler in the world if you need to do that. It's just gonna feel more awkward to do that. And it might take a little more psychological energy for you to do that. So you can use either hand, but one feels more natural. All right, why this matters. Understanding personality helps us appreciate differences. Oh, not everybody's like me? No, not everyone's like you. Not everyone sees the world the way you see it. It helps us understand ourselves, align with our design, and grow in areas outside of our natural preferences. There are definitely ways that you can grow in the areas that you feel like are not preferences. For me, I'm a super high N. And I do things intentionally to kind of work that sensing muscle because otherwise if I'm too much in my head and too much in my end zone, I will like bump into tables and like not be aware of myself spatially and that kind of thing. So I do like somatic practices in my spiritual formation and, I'm very body aware when I am in my, like, spiritual practices. I work out. I don't anymore, but I used to power lift. That was just a way for me to be very in my body and get out of my head a little bit as an introverted intuitive. Cooking is another one. You can grow that sensing function, through cooking. Which I thought was so interesting when Martin said he was a chef because he's an INTJ, and INTJ's intuition is very high, and cooking is a sensory activity, so we'll have to have a conversation about that, but the goal isn't to put people in boxes, we're not gonna box you. If you're in a box, get out of the box. The goal is just to understand how you're wired and how you can flourish. So, that's an overview of the very basic, Myers-Briggs framework. Like I said, the 4 letters is just a code. The real meat of the Myers-Briggs is in these 8 cognitive functions, and I'm gonna do this in a different video because some of you may not care about this. You may just want your 4-letter type. You can read the description, you can put it into ChatGPT, see what it tells you, and that might be good enough for you. And if it is, awesome, that's good enough. If you wanna dig deeper, these 8 cognitive functions are where the meat is at. This is what sets Myers-Briggs apart from all the other frameworks. I'll give you a quick overview of this 2-minute overview, and then I'll go into it deeper in another video. But basically, if you think of your brain like a car, in the car, you have the driver, you have the passenger, and then you have 2 kids in the back seat. The driver is your primary cognitive function. The passenger is your secondary cognitive function, the co-pilot. And then your third and fourth are the 2 kids in the back seat. And this, once you know these cognitive functions, it can really give you a lot of revelation on your shadow, why you feel like your brain is tricking you sometimes, and things like that. The 4 dichotomies have an interplay. So you have the 2 in the middle, sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling. These are how you perceive information and make decisions. But each of those can be extroverted and introverted. So you can extrovert sensing and introvert sensing. You can extrovert intuition and introvert intuition. And they have certain labels, N-I, N-E, S-I, S-E. Same with thinking. So you can extrovert your thinking or introvert your thinking. You can extrovert your feeling or introvert your feeling. And they're T-E-T-I, F-E-F-I, just like it looks on here. And these operate differently. So, for example, extroverting feeling. If you're high in extroverting feeling, like your ESFJ, ENFJ, okay, that's top right here. ESFJ, extroverting feeling. And if you're ENFJ over here, extroverting feeling is in the driver's seat. You are using your feeling function in the external world, promoting harmony, hospitality, making people feel welcome, smiling, hugging. This cognitive function can also put you at risk for putting other people before yourself, if you're extroverting feeling. It's very different than if you're introverting feeling. Now, who has super high introverting feeling? ISFPs. Introverted feeling is in the driver's seat. Also, INFPs. One of my daughters is an INFP. Introverted feeling operates very differently than extroverted feeling because you're using your feeling function in the internal world. So this has more to do with, what are my values? Am I aligned with my values? Am I being authentic to myself? This has to do with integrity, being integrated with yourself. I'll go more in depth into that in another video, but that's just a little teaser. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that was helpful to you and quick and easy. There's obviously a lot more depth to it, and I go into a lot more depth in my book. Not a ton more depth, honestly. If you're brand new to the Myers-Briggs, hopefully this video was super helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Well, I hope you enjoyed that short little overview of the Myers-Briggs. And if you want to go deeper with me, you can do that inside of my school community called New Creation Academy. There's a link for that down in the video description or the show notes. If you missed the first 2 videos in this series and you want to catch those, I'll leave a link for the playlist. There's actually a playlist on the Unhinged YouTube channel with all of the videos in this series, so you can check that out. And if you want to jump into Martin's school community, all of the videos from the entire Discover Your Life Purpose Challenge are still up. You can watch them anytime and binge all of his courses in there as well. Everything's free with your membership. I will leave a link for that in the description as well. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again on the next one. No, there's a meme that has INTJ and it's got like, this is my happy face. This is my excited face.
No, that's just my resting bitch face. Brilliantly you, or we made a pun on it in a previous podcast. I can't remember what. Boringly everybody else. That was
Boringly everybody else.
Yeah.
I redesigned my book cover for that. Did you see that?
I saw it. You can either be brilliantly you or you can be boringly everybody else.